Welcome to Unit 1, Topic 2 of the project Creativity Techniques for Higher Education Teachers. Today, we are going to discuss when it's useful to use creativity methods in the teaching and how to apply project-based learning, problem-based learning, and collaborative learning. In this subunit, you will learn about first, types of experiential learning. Second, main skills to be developed. Then we're going to discuss third, what is project-based learning versus fourth, what is problem-based learning. After the theory part, we will provide practical examples on applying project-based learning and problem-based learning. So why creativity in teaching is so important? A good classroom environment always has some elements of creativity, which makes the lessons more interesting and interactive. The right mix of creativity along with curriculum helps students to be innovative and also encourages them to learn new things. Students can grow up as good communicators in addition to improving their emotional and social skills. Creative teaching methods help students to learn without the pressure of learning. Including creative activities along with curriculum gains their interest for learning. Unlike the conventional teaching methods, the creative classrooms give them the opportunity to express themselves. Whether it is debate or classroom discussion or field trips, students have a chance to become a part of it. Integrating more hands-on learning and making room for visual reflection helps to reduce stress and stimulate imaginative thinking capability. A number of approaches to teaching and learning are considered in this course that help to nurture creativity and innovation. Sometimes we forget that the same aspects are important when teaching engineering subjects. Dr. Aruna Shekhar from Massey University in New Zealand says that there is growing evidence of the need to prepare engineering students for the future world in which they will practice as professionals. The world has changed rapidly in the last decades, and major changes such as globalization, technological advances, interconnectedness, and accessibility to information influence the way current and future generations of students learn. Educational practices that overemphasize theory alone are outdated, as it is important for students to not only gain knowledge about engineering, but also to learn how to be an engineer. Hence, a transformation in teaching and learning approaches is essential to prepare students to solve complex problems in a global world. In order for students to practice as engineers, they need to have had exposure to a number of projects that offer real-world problems along with the complexity and uncertainty of factors that influence such problems. Students need to learn how to frame a problem, identify stakeholders and their requirements, design and select concepts, test them, and so on. Learning to apply theoretical principles is much better done when given real problems and hands-on activities in projects. For example, a project-based learning teachers facilitate and guide students through the engineering design process while students actively engage in research and problem-solving activities within a team setting. Problem solving and inquiry are at the heart of learning. By definition, they require learners to think hard, using their existing understanding to engage with the question or problem at hand and work out solutions. Teaching questions or problems at exactly the right level to stretch student thinking and providing just enough support is the mark of a good teacher. Even a small change in teaching approach can bring about a change in a learner's creative disposition. If learners start to see that there is not always one right answer to many questions, both in school and in life, then their creative confidence will grow. There are so many inspiring speakers who comprehensively explain the importance of creativity. I would like you to watch one of them now from TED Talks, Joe Rule, who tells us which are teaching methods to inspire the students of the future.
I have one of the best jobs in the world because I get to work with people who are fun, funny, energetic, creative, and insightful. And they happen to be 14 to 18 years of age. I really do think kids keep a person young, and I think that's probably why when I'm in the presence of adults, I sometimes don't know how to act, so you'll forgive me. So, inspiring the students of the future. What really works? 37 years of teaching experience have taught me that two things are needed: research-based teaching techniques and relationship. Relationship is huge, but we'll talk more about that later. What I'd like to look at first are the techniques. I think probably most of us remember the teacher-centered classroom. This is probably what we're familiar with from our youth. You remember the teacher was up front and center. The students were in nice, neat rows, not allowed to talk to each other. And the teacher, the source of authority, downloaded information to the kids who regurgitated it back up on a test designed to measure how much content they could remember. Now, I have to admit, I love lecturing, but my students don't always love it. It does not always inspire. So I was thinking, what really inspires? Years ago, I was doing lunch duty at school, standing in the lunchroom, being visible, watching kids go through the cafeteria line. And as I watched the kids going through the line, it occurred to me, they love having choices. And so I said to myself, maybe that would work in the classroom. Let the kids have choices. And so that's what I did. I converted my classroom to a situation where student choice was a big part of the room, along with 4 other C's: collaboration, communication, critical thinking, and creativity. Actually, over 10 years ago, the National Education Association identified those last 4 C's on the list as essential 21st century skills that kids should learn, and I agree wholeheartedly. I've added choice to the top of the list, not as a skill for kids to learn, but rather as a characteristic of the classroom. By choice, I mean a situation where many learning activities are available to students, designed to meet the many diverse learning styles that they have. And the kids love it as much as they love choices in the cafeteria. Now, I think we're made for learning this way. Imagine our early hominid ancestors out looking for food. Don't you know that finding and tracking that woolly mammoth required critical thinking and problem solving? It definitely required collaboration, teamwork. I mean, you wouldn't want to do this by yourself. No way. And collaboration required communication. And then I imagine those people sitting around the campfire at night, reliving the adventures of the day's hunt. They must have had smiles on their faces when they were retelling the story of the hunt. And I know they smiled when they put those cave paintings up on the wall, because creativity is a uniquely human, pleasurable, satisfying activity. So I believe our brains are wired for the 5 C's. And since they're wired for the 5 C's, that authentic learning will happen when kids are allowed to engage in the 5 C's. And not just learning, but I think kids will enjoy a classroom set up like this and even be inspired in this way. Now, this requires a classroom set up based on the 5 C's requires a shift from a teacher-centered classroom to a student-centered classroom. And this requires the teacher to remove him or herself from front and center, becoming more of a guide on the side rather than a sage on the stage. But this opens up opportunities to not merely teach, but to coach, to mentor, to nurture, and inspire. And that's why I love it so much. Now, time out. It's important for me to mention these are not my original ideas. I stand on the shoulders of giants. Remember Plutarch? He said it a long time ago. The mind is not a vessel that needs filling, but wood that needs igniting. And more recently, Albert Einstein. Education is not the learning of facts, but the training of the mind to think. All right, you're going to have to bear with me. I'm going to get real goosebumply for a minute. One of the absolute most exciting moments of my life, my professional life, was meeting Albert Einstein just a few years ago. Changed my life bumping into him in that wax museum. What a moment it was. So I stand on the shoulders of giants. Giants like Montessori and Piaget. And Dr. Sam Postlethwaite, who was doing a lot of these things in his biology classes at Purdue University back in the 1960s. I'm a product of the Purdue biology department. That's where I fell in love with biology. I stand on the shoulders of giants like Tom Watts and Steve Randack, who were doing this back in the 1970s in their high school biology classes. I stand on the shoulders of many giants called elementary school teachers and special ed teachers. So I'm a product of all of those mentors. So collaboration, communication, critical thinking, creativity, and student choice. What's it look like? If I could just share with you briefly the experiences that I've tried with this. I've taken my 9th grade biology classes and divided the school year up into 2 to 3 week units. At the beginning of each unit, the students are given a menu of all the smorgasbord activities that are available on the menu. Now, this has been challenging because I've had to write all of these activities so that no matter what combination of activities a student chooses to do based on their learning styles, and no matter what order they choose to do them in, they'll still achieve the required objectives for the unit. It's been fun. It's been a challenge. But the kids love it. They love having the choice. And there are many times when they forget that I'm even in the room, and that's okay. One of the things that is not required, there are 2 activities normally in every unit that are not required. One is the test at the end of the unit, and the other one is the computer tutorial. I've taken several summers and written these self-paced, interactive computer tutorials that the kids work through. They're designed to take the place of the stuff that I used to lecture on. Kids have told me in private, Mr. Rule, we like the tutorials better than your lectures. And that's okay. That's perfectly okay because it's all about them. And so if you came to visit my class on a typical day, you would see some kids working through the computer tutorials. You would very likely see some kids working on some website activities online. It's very possible you would see some kids in a corner of the room with headphones on watching a video related to the unit, writing out answers to questions that accompany the video. I'm sure would see students doing laboratory activities. You would probably notice some kids tending to their ongoing science fair projects And I know for sure you would probably find a group of kids off in another corner around an educational game designed to teach them about some biological concept related to the unit. And you would likely see some kids doing some hands-on, minds-on simulations, learning about some other biological phenomena. I know you would see some kids off in a corner filling out what are called reflection sheets that are designed to get them to think about their learning, self-evaluate their efforts, take past knowledge and connect it to new knowledge. And there's one other activity on the menu that a lot of kids really enjoy. It's called arts and entertainment. It's on the menu in every unit. And this is where the students take any concept they've learned in the unit and at home develop some kind of a project presentation and then present it to the rest of the class on the last day of the unit. Arts and entertainment. Has to be non-traditional. It's only limited by their imagination. So they can come in and perform a song, a skit, present a movie, present a model that they've built, poetry, any non-traditional way of demonstrating their knowledge of something they've learned in the unit. For example, these two young ladies in our biochemistry unit took it upon themselves to build a model of a chlorophyll molecule using gumdrops to represent the atoms. These two young ladies, they're sisters. They happened to decide to demonstrate in a very creative way the fact that they each inherited half of their genes from mom and half of their genes from dad. Gotta love them. This method of teaching, for me, I have found, 37 years experience, is not only effective, but it's fun because it allows me to sit down with small groups of students while I'm team teaching with that fleet of 10 computers. It gives me the opportunity to sit down with a group of 2, 3, or 4, or 5 kids and respond to questions that they initiate. It allows me the opportunity to listen to their thinking. And teachers, when you do this, if you do this, the whole situation creates somewhat of a teacher paradox. Because by removing yourself from front and center, you seem to become less important. But paradoxically, in reality, you become more important. Because when working as a guide on the side, you're freed up to use the most powerful teaching techniques I have ever run across in 37 years. They're as old as the hills. It doesn't matter what techniques are used, these two always work. I'm talking about two loves. First, the teacher's love for the subject and passion for the subject. And secondly, the teacher's genuine love for the kids. First, let's talk about the passion. You know what I remember about 3rd grade? I remember Jenny on the bus. I'm not kidding. 3rd grade. No, the thing I remember most about the classroom in 3rd grade is I remember our teacher every day after lunch would read to us for 10 to 15 minutes. She would read to us Tom Sawyer. What an adventure. Oh, we had black and white TV, we had cartoons on TV, but this was different. It was obvious to us that Miss Hershey loved reading and she was passionate about reading to us. Tom Sawyer, what an adventure. At the end of the 10-minute reading period, I couldn't wait until the next day to find out what would happen to Tom and his friends. I don't know if Miss Hershey realized it or not. I should have written her a letter a long time ago. She inspired me to be a reader. But you see, she wasn't saddled with state-mandated standards and state-mandated high-stakes standardized testing. And so she was free to teach and inspire. I'll never forget her. She means the world to me. I should have written her a long time ago. Then for that other love, teachers' love for the kids. If there are any teachers in the audience, don't get nervous. I'm not talking about warm, fuzzy, emotional love. I'm talking about genuine, decisional, put the other person first kind of love. It motivates. It inspires in a powerful way. I'm talking about the kind of love that C.S. Lewis wrote about it in his book, The Four Loves. He described it as agape love, the highest level of love known. A self-sacrificial kind of love, a love that's passionately committed to the well-being of the other. This kind of love is not always emotional, but it is always decisional. So teachers, great news. This means you can love your kids even when they're not likable. Does that ever happen? Because this kind of love is not emotional, it's decisional, and it motivates and inspires in a powerful way, and it's as old as the hills. So teachers, an airtight lesson plan is important. A well-organized, consistent discipline plan is important. Effective use of technology is important. The standards are important, but please don't let them stifle your creativity. All these things are important. But what the kids are going to remember most of all is you. Don't forget that sixth C, caring. That is the most effective, most powerful, most inspiring way of teaching, getting their attention, motivating them, inspiring them. What they're going to remember most is that you look them in the eye and ask them about their extracurricular activities and their part-time jobs. What they're going to remember most is that you just asked them in the hall how they were doing. What they're going to remember most is that you worked really hard in the first couple weeks of school to learn their names in the first couple days. What they're going to remember most is that you went to their athletic events and their concerts. What they're going to remember most is that you led the class in loud, off-key choruses of happy birthday. What they're going to remember most is that when they made the newspaper, you put their newspaper clippings up on the wall in the classroom, and you told them to autograph them. And you told them to do that so that someday when their autographs were worth lots of money, it would fund your retirement. What they're going to remember is that you were transparent and that you were real and that you had the ability to laugh at yourself and laugh with them. So what's really important? How do we motivate? How do we inspire? Allow kids to involve themselves in the classroom in student choice, collaboration, communication, critical thinking, and creativity. But don't forget that sixth C. It's probably the most important one because the greatest of these is love. Thank you.
Now, let's talk about experiential learning. The process of learning through experience or learning through reflection on doing, we call experiential learning. Our aim of this course is to analyze further experiential learning and get to know types of experiential learning activities and how they're applied in practice. So, as I have mentioned before, experiential learning is often referred to as learning by doing. It is a series of learning activities that comprise both concrete experience and guided reflection. Students are provided the opportunity to continually distill and integrate knowledge acquired from class with relevant situations and problems. They also have an opportunity to gain communication, critical thinking, and collaboration skills that have been identified as important for their lives. Students also learn about themselves. They learn how they learn. They have opportunities to discover new passions and concerns. They can relate past experience to these new experiences and uncover assumptions that block new learning. There are many versions of experiential learning activities that can be used in a class, whether face-to-face or virtual. First of them is problem-based learning. In problem-based learning, students work with problems that don't have a concrete answer to develop their problem-solving skills, critical thinking, and collaborative learning skills. Second one is project-based learning, which is similar to problem-based learning. However, in this case, students are required to develop a project. Next one is games, simulations, role-playing, or debate. Students actively enact assigned roles that simulate real-world conditions or situations. And community engagement, where students are immersed in actual real-world conditions. Internships, practicums, service learning, and research studies enable students to apply acquired skills and/or to feel out situations or conditions in the outside world. In the 1980s, David Cobb described experiential learning as a process that brings education and personal development together with workplace experience. He expressed this as a cycle of experience, observation, and reflection. There are five fundamental aspects that are key to successfully planning and delivering experiential learning. Authenticity. Any experiential learning must be real and relevant to students and the challenges they face both during the program and afterward. This is part of the student's process of learning to recognize significant learning opportunities in the future. We often seem to look back on our past experiences and recognize them as important learning milestones. Part of learning how to learn is getting to this recognition earlier, ideally as the experience is happening. Second, integration throughout a study program. Experiential learning events should be used to build a student's ability to learn by complementing other sessions and modules, to encourage them to reflect repeatedly on the results of action and the development of appropriate responses. Careful integration can provide multiple and developing cycles of experience, reflection, and experimentation. Examples include learning to work in teams on a full-day outdoor exercise, cooperating with others on innovative designs, and a corporate challenge where students work together under time pressure to address a problem posed by a large organization. Third, ensuring all students can take part. Experiential learning needs to be accessible and flexible enough to accommodate the learning needs of different students. In some cases, experiential learning can be physically challenging or demanding as it takes students out of their comfort zones. This risks isolating those who will not or cannot take part. The design of learning must therefore take the varying needs and abilities of the whole cohort of students into account. Fourth, effective measurement. Experiential learning should be designed so The overall impact on the students and the performance of individual students can be analyzed. Without effective measurement and reflection, experiential learning can sometimes be viewed as a gimmick or a bit of fun, and not true part of the overall education process. And fifth, memorability. Finally, effective experiential learning needs to be highly memorable. The learning experience we create for students should be remembered long after graduation. Memory of specific experience can form the basis of templates for actions in the future. Students will recall some experiences more than others, reflecting their individual interests and the achievements they value. Now, let's revise the previous information. You will have 3 minutes to think about what types of experiential learning did you already apply in your courses. Think, how did it improve students' learning results, and what challenges did you face? Let's come back to our theory part. Following six components will help to better understand what experiential learning is. Experiential learning includes concrete experiences that relate content to the real world. An experiential learning strategy is based upon real-world questions or problems that are related to the content of a course and are situated in a real-world environment or setting that becomes part of the learning experience. These real-world problems or questions require considerable investigation by students to arrive at probable solutions. There is no single solution to the problems or questions the students confront in experiential learning. The process of learning to work with these problems or questions is a skill that students will use throughout their lifetime of work and living. Second, experiential learning is learner-centered. In experiential learning, students are responsible for many of the decisions regarding their learning, unlike when instructors develop the project outline for the students and provide direction for the process. In experiential learning, students have autonomy. They address the core issues with their own planning and the resources they discover. Experiential learning requires faculty to engage in modeling, coaching, mentoring, and support. These roles vary greatly from many traditional teaching roles. Students are also challenged to take on roles that differ greatly from many traditional student roles. They are largely responsible for their own learning. Third, experiential learning involves the integration of knowledge through critical thinking and creativity. Critical reflection is the process where students think critically and creatively and apply learning to their own lives in other contexts. Experiential learning involves students in synthesizing and analyzing information and applying knowledge to new situations. Throughout the stages of experiential learning, students are integrating knowledge from their prior life experiences and educational background. They're using cross-disciplinary approach as they tap resources from outside the discipline to address the key problem or question. Critical thinking and creativity are key components of experiential learning. Fourth, experiential learning requires students to develop communication and collaboration skills, including oral, written, and media strategies. Most experiential learning strategies require that students work in small groups so they can experience collaborative teamwork. These are not the kinds of groups where students work on their own and assemble ideas at the very end. Just as students will be working in teams in their careers, so should they in experiential learning. Group work invites challenges for instructors in assigning students to teams, developing a process of working together, and finding ways to continually communicate. Fifth, experiential learning requires students to develop information literacy skills. Students will need to assess information and apply knowledge during these experiential learning strategies. You can establish an information repository by identifying credible resources, but the goal is for students to find resources they will need to solve the problems they encounter. Locating their own resources provides an opportunity for students to gain information literacy skills. At this point, think about the types of information that will be useful to your students in working with real-world issues in your course. Sixth, experiential learning requires students to participate in formative and summative assessment of their work. Assessing student progress throughout the process of experiential learning is important. Assessment of processes such as critical thinking, evaluation of evidence, analysis of information, and justification of arguments is difficult. Assessment should vary in type and stake, such as low-stake quizzes to test foundational knowledge and critical reflection evaluation.
Now, let's review what we have learned so far. Learning to apply theoretical principles is much better done when given real problems and hands-on activities in projects. Experiential learning is often referred to as learning by doing. There are 5 fundamental aspects that are key to successfully planning and delivering experiential learning: authenticity, integration throughout a study program, ensuring all students can take part, effective measurement, and memorability. Experiential learning includes concrete experiences that relate content to the real world. Experiential learning is learner-centered. Experiential learning involves the integration of knowledge through critical thinking and creativity. Experiential learning requires students to develop communication and collaboration skills, including oral, written, and media strategies. Experiential learning requires students to develop information literacy skills. And experiential learning requires students to participate in formative and summative assessment of their work.